Hello and welcome to Feck the World with me, Alice, and Professor Graham Parkes from the University of Cork. He's currently lecturing in philosophy. And today we're going to be talking to you about nuclear power. So last week, the report came out from Sellafield. Finally, we've got some word on whether or not we're all going to turn green and grow two heads. Basically, come rain or shine, whether there's a meteorite shower that just happens to bombard what was the nuclear power plant, whether the sea levels rise, we are in the clear. And the worst case scenario would be the nuclear waste being flooded out of the storage and going into the Irish Sea and polluting our fish, which obviously is not to be underestimated either. So in a way, it could potentially be a problem, but only socio-economic problem. So that's kind of good news. Bad news, this week also, there was more news from the UK on the nuclear front, and that is that there's going to be more nuclear power plants, and one of them will be in Wales. So the mystery still continues. Where do you stand on the nuclear issue?
Well, I think that the advantages are they are relatively safe. I mean, if you look at the safety record of the whole industry and match that with the fossil fuel industry in terms of injuries to people, deaths, damage to the environment and so on, nuclear is much safer. Mm-hmm. It also contributes less to global warming, which is an excellent thing. However, when things do go wrong, as we saw in Fukushima, they go badly wrong, and in ways that are somewhat insidious, because you don't see the dangers, and many of them aren't felt until long afterwards.
With Fukushima, it felt like it's sort of now it's listed as the third nuclear catastrophe, but when you actually look at the bones of what happened, was there 56 deaths as a direct? No, that was.
No, that's Chernobyl. Yes, yeah. No, there were no deaths, as far as I know.
Yeah.
So no, it wasn't. Not in terms of immediate mortality, but there's still the cold shutdown process is still going on. I mean, it's a fire you can't put out. So, and also we still don't know what's happening. I mean, the Japanese government is not the most open of governments, and we're finding out that there's a lot we should have known earlier that we didn't.
I mean, in that case, do you think it's fair that that what happened in Fukushima should have such an adverse impact on the way we see nuclear power today? If a lot of what happened was down to human error and the way the government has dealt with it, and the fact that they're still not really being very honest about it, obviously that is important, but it completely undermines what nuclear power can give us as a society, how it can solve so many of the issues that we have today.
Yes, that's true. I mean, I think what we learned, the main thing I learned anyway from the Fukushima incident was how much of a cover-up there was around the whole issue of safety. It came out, and apparently this is the same in the UK and the US, that the regulators are more or less part of the industry they're regulating. And so, the safety issues there really need to be addressed. But at one level, I think this question we ask, should we continue to meet our energy needs by going more with nuclear or more into fossil fuels, and we'll develop carbon sequestration and so on? For me, that's not the right question to be asking. That's dangerously superficial, because we're not really looking at the root of the problem, which is this drive that we have in the modern world to consume ever greater amounts of energy.
But do you not think it's almost a little bit late now for a holistic approach to the environment? I mean, if you read all the reports, it seems like we're pretty much done for. So is it not just a case of it's bad, but it seems that's the way we're going?
Yeah, it's not good.
But I mean, surely we can if we jump on it quick enough and utilize the energy that is there. With nuclear power, you need just such small amounts of uranium compared to the amounts of fossil fuels that you'd need. That I don't understand really what's holding us back. We just need to it takes long enough to construct the plants, so we need to be decisive and sort of get going.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right, it does. I mean, but to me it seems suspiciously like you're getting something for nothing, you know, that it seems so, you get so much energy from so little input. But, I mean, that makes me suspicious, and so I want to look a little more at the outputs. And when you have plutonium waste that has a half-life of, 10,000 years, and we keep hearing we're going to have solutions about where to put that, where to store it, keep it safe, and so on. Nobody wants it in their backyard.
No.
And the costs of both keeping it safe now, protecting it from terrorists especially, you know, that's a new threat now, and then that we bequeath to future generations this deadly stuff.
I mean, technology has advanced so far already and so quickly. Even since Chernobyl, Chernobyl was a one-off in a way because of the circumstances, but we've learned so much, and we've now got the idea of reprocessing the waste materials, which is brilliant, and because there is so much energy that is wasted in the nuclear power plants. Surely that can go some way if we can harness what we've discovered so far. Give it another 20 years, and there has to be a way of dealing with. I know it's the biggest, the worst point on nuclear power, and it makes it really difficult to argue for it. But at the end of the day, so far we have managed to overcome so many issues, and I really think that if we carry on investing, like researching, I do think that we could.
Well, you may be right. I hope you are, because I think people are probably going to go ahead anyway. But again, it's the spirit of Prometheus is at work here. You know, the idea that technical fixes will come along, that we'll find something else, technology will save us. And, you know, I mean, they talk about nuclear fusion now too. I mean, that looks promising. But, you know, we're performing these incredibly complex technological operations on the very core of the material world in order to get this energy. And, you know, it seems to me that should make us think, I mean, is there no alternative when the byproducts are so deadly and last so long?
I suppose when you look at the alternative for renewable energy, we've got wind farms, biofuels, wave energy. But when you look at the space that these energy sources take up and the damage that they do now to the environment, you can't help but think that nuclear power taking up a small fraction of that space, and we have so much time to deal with the question of the waste that it does produce. When you're looking at in that scale, and then you're looking at the pressure that we're under to get our CO2 emissions down, to me it would still seem viable. We in Ireland are currently probably not going to meet the CO2 emissions. It looks like we're going to overshoot by about 6 million tonnes of CO2, I think it was. And actually one nuclear power plant could solve that.
Yes, I mean, if you look at I think we need to look at the alternatives, because the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change last year came out with a very interesting report that said that by 2050, if governments fund them, we could be satisfying 80% of our energy needs by then through renewables. The ones that you mentioned, biofuels is another, and of course solar and photovoltaic. But they said only if governments really actively pursue that. And at the moment, governments, the UK government, like the US, they're pouring money into the fossil fuels industries, you know, with subsidies. So, and everyone says, except the industries themselves, that should be stopped. So, you know, I think there's an urgent need to realize that there is this third set of alternatives that is viable if the research and development is done. And I think in the long term we'd be safer with those.
And do you think then, I mean, one of the issues with these sources of energy is that they're not constant. You know, the wind stops we're a bit buggered.
Right.
Obviously, if we have like a mix of energy sources, then that would sort that out. But considering nuclear power would run as a baseload energy source, it would run straight through. Would that?
It would have that advantage. I mean, one of the problems is they cost so much to build, and no insurance company will insure them. Now that should make us think about it too.
Yeah.
So you need government subsidies, and that means our taxpayers' money. And I don't know what would happen if you asked the taxpayers whether they'd say we could divert some of that. But I think one thing we haven't mentioned is we need to use less. There needs to be energy efficiency, conservation. We need to ask ourselves, are we really getting happier by consuming all these steadily greater amounts of energy? I don't think we are. I think we need to look at that too.
Do you think, with all due respect, that that's realistic? I mean, do you think that society is willing to inflect and actually make these positive changes? It's just so hard to get people to respond to issues to do with the environment. I mean, It's getting easier, but...
Yeah, I know you're right there. If we make energy, if we give it its true cost, in economics, the externalities, the idea that pumping CO2 into the atmosphere, it doesn't cost, nobody gets charged for that, but that's a cost to the environment, to people's health and so on. If you internalize those, if you change your economic system, it's not difficult, you just internalize those costs, then many forms of energy will be much more expensive, and then that will be an incentive for people to use less. I mean, it's sort of deceptively cheap at the moment, that's the problem.
So sort of using capitalism to your advantage.
Yes, if we have to keep on with capitalism, which we probably do for a while, might as well try to fix it, make it work
One step at a time.
Yeah.
I actually came across some research there about natural nuclear power. Now, it hadn't really occurred to me that I've always thought of it as quite a man-made issue. But what happened have you heard of Oklo in Africa?
No.
There's an area where billions of years ago there were stores of uranium underground, and when plant life developed, the water seeped down and sparked a reaction. And this was a sustained, ongoing sort of nuclear reaction that went on for millions of years. And then when it sort of ran out, decayed, it was stored. Now, it's interesting because the way it was stored, obviously, it was all completely natural. It was surrounded by, I think it was graphite, and there was clay and sandstone, and that's quite similar to the way that we deal with the nuclear waste now. And that led me to thinking that actually, when you look at nuclear power as not so unnatural, it's kind of like it's another pro-nuclear power point, because it would be more working with the environment, with the reaction that's already been sort of
initiated naturally. Yes,
How would you, from a philosophical point of view, I'm kind of interested to see how it would.
I'm well disposed towards natural things, certainly. My question would be, something very important happened with the Industrial Revolution, because the fuel for energy was limited to what you could grow on the Earth's surface. With farming and so on, we grew extra trees and biomass to burn. With the Industrial Revolution, we were able to mine deep into the earth, and mining is a Promethean, it's one of the arts that Prometheus gave to humans, very deep into the earth, and using heavy machinery, get the coal out, which was energy from the sun that came in hundreds of thousands of years ago. So we broke through the limit of what we can burn for energy here on the surface of the planet by going down. And we seem to be obsessed with that. Fracking is the same thing, and we dig these mines deeper and deeper. We're going to sequester the carbon deep underground. We're going to mine, but instead of taking stuff out, we're going to put it back in. And so this natural, I'd be just a little suspicious because of the technologies needed to even get to it.
And it does seem to me that a lot of when you talk about technology, a lot of the issues with nuclear power is a distinct distrust for our ability to to perfect the technologies that we have and to create more in a way that we can sustainably use the goods of the earth, basically. But like, I'd be all for technological progression, and you just can't, I don't think you can go backwards. So would you be against sort of technological advancement in that respect?
Oh, no, not, absolutely not. But I think we need to look at what kinds of technologies, and there are sort of Promethean-inspired technologies, and then there are sustainable technologies like sailboats and water wheels and windmills and so on. And you know, there's a lot of work being done on biomimicry, you know, where we develop technologies that mimic stuff that nature, mimic processes that nature does. So I agree. I mean, there's no way we can go back. I don't think anyone really seriously, except the occasional Luddite, suggests that we should. But we really need to take a very close look about which technologies we're using and what their long-term implications and consequences are. But as you know, politicians and economists tend to look, what the far future for them is 6 months or a year, but we need to be looking at generations now.
Definitely. Listen, thanks so much for coming along and joining us today on Feck TV. It's been a pleasure having you. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
That went fast.
I know, I didn't know.